Laura Moffat.
Modernisation of the accident and emergency services are bringing very real improvements to the patient experience and to safety. In Sir George Alberti's report published yesterday, it clearly expresses that. How can we make sure that if there are local difficulties, as there are in the Surrey and Sussex Trust, when those services have been transferred to another hospital, where ambulances are waiting for up to 2 hours, that that doesn't undermine that fantastic work that's going on to make sure that it happens?
But first of all, I entirely understand the concern that my honourable friend raises. And I think this is why it is important in the end. These are decisions taken by the Strategic Health Authority and how they best meet local needs. But she is right, of course, in saying that, as the report yesterday indicated, accident and emergency care in this country has undergone something of a transformation over the past few years. And it is, I think, rather good to note that there are people coming from abroad now, from America, from Australia, looking at our accident emergency services and calling them an example that should be followed elsewhere. That doesn't, of course, take away the difficulties that can arise locally, and I'm sure that that is something my honourable friend can make representations to in respect of a Strategic Health Authority. But in the end, I think these decisions are best taken locally.
Michael Hurd.
The answer, Mr. Speaker, to the completely bogus point made by the Prime Minister a few moments ago is that both the Shadow Chancellor and the Shadow Defence Secretary are pledged to increase spending on Britain's frontline forces by £2.7 billion. Now, why is the Prime Minister, on Friday of this week, going to sign a constitution which will entrench Europe's economic failings and drag Britain down too?
Just before I get on to that point, I think I would like to continue the discussion on defence spending a little longer, if I might. It simply is not right. How can he have the Shadow Chancellor say that he's going to impose that... Oh, yes.
Order. Perhaps we can leave defence and answer the question.
We shall continue this discussion over the coming months. In respect of Europe, the reason why we want to sign this treaty is that we think it modernises European institutions. When Europe is operating as a Europe of 25, perhaps 27, later 30 countries, it is important to have sensible rules in Europe, but this protects absolutely the right of this country to set its tax rates, its foreign policy, its defence. It preserves, actually, our opt-in on asylum and immigration. It is therefore a sensible deal for this country, and we know where the right honourable gentleman and his friends want to go. They want to go out of Europe, and that is not sensible.
Well, the description I gave, Mr. Speaker, I'll repeat it, that the Constitution will entrench Europe's economic failings and drag Britain down too, comes from a man who was the Prime Minister's chief economic advisor for 6.5 years. Shouldn't we take his advice seriously?
I'm sure I always took his advice seriously, but I think it is important to recognise... I think it is important to recognise... I think it's important to recognise that a Europe of 25 is a Europe Britain should be part of. Why? Because 60% of our trade is with Europe. Millions of British jobs depend on our being in the European Union. Well, you see, the Tory party actually wants to use the refusal of this treaty as a means of renegotiating existing membership of the European Union. Hear, hear, they say. So let's be quite clear. His opposition to this new treaty is not an opposition about the treaty itself. It is to use the treaty as an excuse to negotiate existing terms of European membership, and that means getting out of Europe. Now, perhaps he will at least confirm this, that it is his policy to renegotiate our existing terms of membership.
Well, let me tell him a few more things that his advisor said. His advisor said this morning, those in favour of the Constitution would like to box people into suggesting that the only alternative is to leave the European Union. That's not the case at all, he said. And he went on to say the British government never really thought through its own position. First, it opposed the written constitution. Then it put forward its own draft, which was treated with contempt. Then there was all that nonsense about tidying up. There was no strategic thinking. So why is the Prime Minister going to Rome on Friday to sign up to a constitution which he himself said was never necessary, which his advisers say is damaging for Britain, and which the British people overwhelmingly don't want? He promised he would stand up for Britain's interest in Europe, but his own adviser says he was gutless. Gutless. Isn't it now clear that this Prime Minister is all talk?
Well, I'll tell him what is gutless. What is gutless is to run from the UK Independence Party into a position... Oh, yes. Yes, that's what's gutless. To end up in a situation where his policy now is to renegotiate Britain's existing terms of membership that would mean that Britain either faced humiliation in that negotiation or withdrawal from Europe. I agree. It is difficult sometimes in this country to make the case for Europe, but I will carry on making that case because it is right in Britain's interests. And the true leader would stand up to UKIP, not run from them.